Brian McManus, a former London police officer, was sentenced to life without parole for the brutal murder of his wife, Lucille McManus, in Warner Robins, Georgia, in 2023. His crimes included striking her with a rubber mallet and strangling her to death, then staging the scene as a suicide to cover his tracks. In this documentary, we delve into the chilling psychology and psychoanalysis behind McManus' actions, exploring what drove a man once sworn to protect to commit such a heinous act. Why zero in on Brian McManus? Because his crime isn't just a murder. It's a masterclass in deception, manipulation, and cold-blooded calculation that screams for psychological scrutiny. Picture this. A 63-year-old woman, Lucille, steps out of her shower, vulnerable, unsuspecting, only to be ambushed by her husband. He smashes her head with a rubber mallet, the impact splintering her skull, then wraps his hands around her throat until her life fades. To cover it up, he strips her body, lays her on their bed, and calls 911, spinning a tale of suicide. He even tries to pin it on her family, tossing evidence like a discarded toy. This isn't just violence. It's a chilling glimpse into a mind that sees people as pawns. The calculated brutality and his ability to lie without flinching make McManus a prime case for peeling back the layers of a predator's psyche. Let's rewind to understand how Brian McManus became a monster. We don't have a full picture of his childhood, but what we do know about his adult life paints a grim portrait. Born in the UK, McManus spent 17 years as a London police officer, a role that demands trust and integrity. But he was fired after multiple women reported feeling sexually threatened by him, a red flag that hints at deep-seated issues with power and control. Psychologically, this suggests a man who thrived on dominating others, especially women, possibly rooted in what Freud called an overactive ID, that raw, selfish drive for gratification. If his superego, the moral compass, was weak, maybe from a childhood lacking strong ethical guidance, his impulses could run wild, unchecked by guilt. His first marriage in the U.S. ended in divorce after a domestic violence arrest, another sign of a pattern. This wasn't a one-off. It was a glimpse into a man who saw relationships as tools, not bonds. Psychoanalytically, McManus might have been projecting his insecurities or unresolved rage onto women, viewing them as objects to manipulate. Narcissistic personality disorder could be in play here. People with NPD often feel entitled, lack empathy, and lash out when a control is threatened. McManus' ability to charm Lucille into marriage within 3 months of meeting on Tinder, while hiding his true motives, screams narcissistic manipulation. He wasn't just after love. He was after a green card, exploiting Lucille's loneliness to secure his place in the U.S. By 2022, McManus was living in Warner Robins, Georgia, with Lucille, her granddaughter, and 2 great-grandchildren. On the surface, he was a doting husband, but beneath that mask was a man juggling a secret life. He took business trips to Florida to see his mistress, weaving a web of lies so convincing that Lucille believed she was in a loving marriage. This duality points to what psychologists call compartmentalization, a defense mechanism where someone separates their moral self from their darker impulses. McManus could play the caring husband while planning to betray Lucille, a sign of a fractured psyche that justified his deceit as downfall, began with a careless mistake. He sent Lucille a text meant for his mistress, exposing his affair. Lucille, heartbroken and furious, threatened to report their marriage as a sham, a move that could have led to his deportation. This moment was a psychological trigger. For someone with narcissistic traits, being exposed as a fraud is unbearable. It shatters their carefully crafted image. McManus didn't just fear deportation. He feared losing control. His response wasn't to beg for forgiveness, but to plot murder, a chilling escalation that suggests a sociopathic lack of remorse. District Attorney Eric Edwards called him an evil sociopath who views the women in his life as disposable, a label that fits the psychological profile of someone who prioritizes self-preservation over human lives. Why Lucille? She wasn't a random target. She was a perfect mark. At 63, Lucille was described as a lonely woman, vulnerable to McManus' charm. Psychoanalytically, she may have represented a maternal figure or a symbol of stability that McManus both craved and resented. Freud's concept of transference could apply here. McManus might have projected unresolved feelings from past relationships onto Lucille, seeing her as both a means to an end and a threat when she defied him. Her vulnerability made her an easy target for grooming, a tactic predators use to build trust before exploiting it. McManus' choice of Lucille also reflects a power dynamic. As a former cop, he knew how to manipulate trust, and living with her family gave him intimate access. Her threat to expose him wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a direct challenge to his control, something a narcissist can't tolerate. Psychologically, this moment likely triggered a narcissistic injury, a wound in his ego that demanded retaliation. Killing her wasn't just about silencing her. It was about reasserting dominance, proving he was still the smartest man in the room, as Assistant District Attorney Ada Duane described him. November 24th, 2023. Warner Robins, Georgia. Imagine the quiet of suburban mornings shattered by unimaginable violence. Lucille steps out of the shower, towel in hand, unaware that her husband is waiting. Without warning, McManus swings a rubber mallet, the heavy thud cracking her skull. Blood spills as she collapses. But he doesn't stop. He wraps his hand around her throat, squeezing until her body goes limp, her spine bruised from the force. The brutality is stomach-churning, multiple lacerations, a fractured skull, brain bleeding, and strangulation marks, as the autopsy later revealed. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated execution. McManus didn't panic. He cleaned the mallet, washed his clothes, and took his dog for a walk, casually tossing the weapon and his phone into a drainage ditch. Then he called 911, claiming he found Lucille dead by suicide. The scene he staged was grim. Her naked body sprawled across their bed, a massive laceration on her head. But his story unraveled fast. No gun was found, no shell casings, and a fresh scratch on his arm, likely from Lucille fighting back, betrayed him. Strangulation, as psychologists note, is deeply personal, requiring sustained intent to kill. For McManus, it was a final act of control, ensuring Lucille could never expose him. What kind of mind does this? McManus fits the profile of a narcissistic sociopath, a term prosecutors used and one that holds up under scrutiny. Sociopathy, or antisocial personality disorder, is marked by a lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, and a disregard for consequences. McManus' history: sexual harassment allegations, a domestic violence arrest, and exploiting Lucille for a green card, shows a pattern of treating people as means to an end. His lack of emotion during police interviews, showing distress only when labeled suspect, screams sociopathic detachment. Narcissism also looms large. His need to be seen as the smartest man in the room drove his elaborate cover-up, from staging a suicide to blaming Lucille's granddaughter and her boyfriend. This points to grandiose narcissism, where someone believes they're above the law, untouchable. Psychoanalytically, his actions suggest a splitting defense mechanism, where he separated his public persona from his private monstrosity. His ability to lie without flinching, claiming a break-in or suicide, hints at a dissociative tendency, where he detached from the reality of his actions to avoid guilt. The crime scene was a study in deception. Police found Lucille's body on the bed, naked, with no signs of a gunshot, despite McManus' claim of suicide. The absence of a weapon and the presence of severe head trauma raised red flags. Security footage showed McManus near a drainage ditch, where police later recovered the rubber mallet in his phone, damning evidence of his cleanup. Cell phone data also debunked his attempt to blame Lucille's granddaughter and her boyfriend, proving they were miles away. Lucille's granddaughter, Jessica Terrell, spoke of her grief. "She was my best friend. I still deeply need her here." Her words cut through the cold facts, reminding us of the human cost. Prosecutors noted McManus' chilling lack of concern, with Assistant District Attorney Justin Duane saying, "He has demonstrated that he is diabolical and evil." The evidence, 27 witnesses and 300 pieces, painted a picture of a man who thought he could outsmart everyone. But the truth, as District Attorney Eric Edwards said, won out. The investigation moved swiftly. On November 24th, 2023, Warner Robins police responded to McManus' 911 call, quickly spotting inconsistencies. Blood under Lucille's fingernails matched the scratch on McManus' arm, and the autopsy confirmed blunt force trauma and strangulation, not a gunshot. Surveillance footage and cell phone data sealed his fate, showing no one else entered the home. By the next day, McManus was arrested, charged with murder. Media outlets like Fox 5, 13 WMAZ, and the Macon Telegraph covered the case extensively, with headlines like "Ex-London Cop Killed Wife, Staged Suicide Capturing the Public's Horror." Posts amplified the outrage, with users like at News Unpopular calling it a shocking double life, and at Stephen E. Price highlighting the affair that sparked the murder. The case became a rallying cry for domestic violence prevention, with Edwards noting it as a gut-wrenching reminder of what's at stake. McManus' trial, starting July 7, 2025, lasted 6 days. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before convicting him of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. On July 16th, Judge Edward Lookmeyer sentenced him to life without parole, ensuring he'd never walk free. In court, prosecutors painted McManus as a serial liar and con man, with Ada Duane saying, "No one deserves to die like that." McManus showed no remorse, his silence as chilling as his crime. Lucille's family, though heartbroken, found some closure, with Jessica Terrell lamenting, "I can't tell her how sorry I am." What does McManus' story tell us about evil? Philosophically, he embodies what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil, an ordinary man committing extraordinary horrors because he failed to question his actions. His life was a series of choices: to manipulate, to deceive, to kill. Existentially, McManus sought meaning through control, using women as stepping stones for his desires. When Lucille threatened that control, he erased her, revealing a void where morality should have been. His life sentence is justice, but it doesn't erase the tragedy. Lucille's voice was stolen, but her story, as Edwards said, was told. The question lingers: how many more McManuses hide among us, cloaked in normalcy, waiting for their mask to slip?